let's go set history on fire.
Recently, I've been doing lots of research on the culture of the Sarmatians, the Scythians, and a lot of other nomadic tribes from back then. I'm planning on doing a full-length History on Fire episodes about them, but in the meantime, please allow me to tell you a story that I particularly love. It involves a lady who shows up only briefly in recorded history, but she does so in a very powerful way. Our tale takes place around the year 530 before Common Era, and it involves a man who was quite possibly the most important figure in the history of the Persian Empire. The man I'm speaking of would be Cyrus the Great, who had defeated multiple kingdoms and turned the Persians from one of many groups vying for control of the Middle East into the principal power of them all. After such a dominant career, around the year 530 before Common Era, Cyrus proposed marriage to a lady named Tomyris, who was the queen of a people known as the Massagetae, who lived around modern-day Turkmenistan, Kazakhstan, Uzbekistan, possibly Tajikistan, Iran, and probably a bunch more places in that area. It's hard to pinpoint precisely since they were part of a nomadic people and we have no documents detailing their exact movements. Culturally, the Massagetae were Scythians and were probably related to the Scythians properly known under that name. But due to some intertribal rivalries, it was them who had pushed the Western Scythians toward the Black Sea. Now, considering that their Western cousins were the scourge of many Western kingdoms, the fact that the Massagetae could beat them and push them west tells us a whole lot about how scary these folks were. Herodotus had this to say about them. They fight both on horseback and on foot. They use bows and lances, but their favorite weapon is the battle axe. They also used much gold in their personal decoration and that of their horses. The marriage proposal was not a case of Cyrus suddenly being hot for the nomadic queen. It was politics, as most royal marriages often are. Cyrus already had wives before, he had wives at the time, so it wasn't a romantic thing. He was looking to add the Massagetae to his subjects. And he figured that the easiest way to do it was to be by going after the low-hanging fruit of a royal marriage, uniting their people and incorporating them into the empire. After all, Tomyris' husband had died, so the way Cyrus saw it is like, well, let me, a real man, step in, marry this queen, put her in my harem, and now I rule her people. Needless to say, Tomyris was not flattered with this proposal, and she basically told him to shove it. She was the queen of a free people, and not about to volunteer to walk into somebody's harem, even the harem of one of the most powerful men on earth. Now, good old Cyrus was not used to hearing the word no very often, so he didn't take this refusal well. Anyone who uttered the word no to him usually ended up dead. Who was this uppity nomadic wench who was living in a tent to say no to him? He was the king of kings, so this insult could not go unavenged. Cyrus had beaten anyone who had ever dared to defy him, so he would figure it would be no problem adding the Massagetae to the list. Plus, once upon a time, the ancestors of the Persians had also been nomads, and they were still no slouches on horseback and with a bow in their hands. According to Herodotus, learning how to ride and shoot the bow were the cornerstones of a Persian education. And so, feeling confident, Cyrus got his invincible army together and marched toward Tomyris' territory. In order to reach her, he had to cross a major river in modern-day Turkmenistan. So for this purpose, his army began building a giant bridge. Tomyris sent him a message saying something along the lines of, "Just quit already, since you'll only end up hurting yourself." An actual quote from her message included the line, "Stop and be king of your own country. But if you will not take this advice, then you are welcome to test the strength of my people." So with that, she went on to say that she would withdraw her people from the river and let him cross so he could have the war he so craved. She also offered to give battle on his side of the river, if he preferred it that way. Cyrus didn't prefer it that way. One of his advisors had told him it would be a shameful thing not to be endured if Cyrus, the son of Cambyses, should yield and give ground before a woman. So as a result, Cyrus decided to cross the river, and as promised, Tomyris let him cross and prepared for battle. Cyrus, however, had not conquered a big chunk of the world by being stupid. He was a sly old fox who understood that the first principle of warfare is deception. So what he did was he set up a trap to stack the deck in his favor. Specifically, what he did was leave behind a giant feast with lots of undiluted wine and food, and then he retreated with most of his army, leaving only a smaller contingent to guard this feast. The smaller group of the army was made of pawns that he was willing to sacrifice. A portion of the Massagetae attacked and easily conquered this camp. After their victory, they filled their bellies and got royally drunk. And that's when Cyrus and the rest of his army showed up again, quickly defeating them and taking many prisoners. Among the prisoners of war was a general who happened to be Tomyris' son. So by now Cyrus felt like he had all he needed to get everything he wanted and more. Tomyris would now have to beg for her son, accept the marriage, and turn the kingdom over to him. Tomyris sent him a fiery message, accusing him of being a coward for using tricks to capture her son, rather than winning in an honest battle. She threatened that if Cyrus returned her son, she would let him return home. Otherwise, I quote, "If you will not, then I swear to you by the sun, lord of the Massagetae, that I shall satisfy your thirst for blood." Cyrus wasn't overly worried with these threats, but at this juncture something happened to deprive him of his strategic advantage. Tomyris' son soon realized that he was being used to blackmail his mother and queen, proving that he also knew a thing or two about tricks. He somehow convinced Cyrus to free his hands. And the way Cyrus saw it is like, well, you are surrounded in the middle of my camp. Where are you gonna flee? So he saw no harm in untying him and freeing his hands. The problem is, no sooner had he done that Tomyris' son killed himself. The idea being, I'm not gonna let you use me to blackmail my mother. Now you deal with her. And that's exactly what he did, because now Cyrus no longer had the strategic advantage that he thought he had acquired. Now all he had was an angry barbarian queen, whose grief had given strength to her desire for vengeance. Tomyris led her army to meet Cyrus on the field of battle. What followed, in Herodotus' opinion, was the most violent battle that he knew of among foreign nations. Considering that Herodotus had written about dozens of insanely brutal battles, this is really saying something. Eventually, the Massagetae did what no other nation had been able to do. They destroyed the Persian army and killed the King of Kings himself. Rather than gaining a wife and a kingdom, Cyrus lost his head. According to Herodotus, Tomyris had Cyrus decapitated. Then she filled a wineskin with blood and placed his head in it. Herodotus offers us the following quote from a speech that Tomyris gave. "Though I'm alive and have defeated you in battle, you have destroyed me, taking my son by guile. But just as I threaten, I give you your fill of blood." There are a whole bunch of stories that are told about Cyrus' death, but this one that I've told you seems to be the most credible, based on the available sources. Now, considering Scythian customs, it seems likely that Cyrus' head ended up becoming a drinking cup in Tomyris' tent. There are a few other versions, in some they say that Cyrus indeed died in this battle, but his body was brought back to Persia. And there are a few others that suggest a more dignified ending for Cyrus. But this is the story that is repeated most often. Just as quickly as she entered the pages of history, Tomyris exits them, and we know nothing more about her. However, her name lived on, to the point that she was even referenced in one of Shakespeare's plays. She became a national hero in Kazakhstan, where coins were minted in her honor, and she even had a planet named after her. It's likely that she lived an amazing life, but all we know about her is this one moment, when the King of Kings thought that he could push around the Queen of the Massagetae.